Hi guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to another retro RPG. And we're back into the old grind. So at the end of another week and the end of another poll, we've got a very slight winner with the Romulan Ship Recognition Manual for the old Star Trek role-playing game from FASA. Now we'll have a look at that on the desktop in just a wee second. But as usual, I'll be back at the end of the video with some other channel related stuff and some other stuff about the poll. But a wee reminder, if you'd like to help the channel out, or you'd like to see these videos a week early, then there's a Patreon down in the description below. So if you click on that, you can see what we've got to offer and help us out, and it'd be very much appreciated. But anyway, let's have a look at the Romulan Ship Recognition Manual. So, this is the Romulan Ship Recognition Manual for the Star Trek role-playing game from FASA. It came out in 1985. Now, it's the third of the 3 ship recognition manuals that came out. There was the Klingon one, the Federation one, which had come out for the first edition game in 1983, and then were updated and re-released for the second edition in 1985, and then this book was brought out for second edition only. But one of the first things I'd like to take note is the cover. While it has an absolutely gorgeous wrap-round image, a cutaway diagram of a Romulan ship showing all the rooms and decks inside, fantastic stuff. I really like these. I was brought up reading comics which had breakaway diagrams in it, and I absolutely adore them. But compared to the covers of the other 2 books, it looks like a step backwards. There's just this very standard font. If I grab my other ones, we've got the Federation and the Klingon books. We can see that while they've got the cutaway diagrams of the starships, they've got this border which FASA tended to use on all their Star Trek role-playing books. And the fact that they're kind of fancy fonts, they're very nice, they're standardized across the books, you've got the logos of the factions which control those ships. It's nice, whereas this really looks quite primitive and looks a lot more like the first edition books, which have beautiful artwork. They just didn't really have a look together which was so good as the second edition. Just an oddity. It doesn't affect what's in the book. And let's have a look at the back cover. So, classified, authorized personnel only, because these books are written as if they are intelligence reports for the Federation about enemy factions and about, of course, about their own ships. The Romulan Ship Recognition Manual is intended for Starfleet personnel with a need to know concerning information on the Romulan Star Navy. This comprehensive study discloses, for the first time, all known combat, visual, and historical data on 40 different Romulan ships and their variants. Also included is a chronology of service and silhouette recognition chart. This manual is a must for all Star Trek enthusiasts. Shown on the cover is a cutaway view of the White Wind cruiser. Now, remembering that at the time when this came out, we'd only ever seen one Romulan starship, the Bird of Prey out of Balance of Power. I believe it's a first season original series episode. I might be wrong with that. But a very early episode. And when the Romulans came back, they were always flying Klingon ships. And the background information had been written that the Romulans and the Klingons had shared technology, because the Klingons end up with cloaking devices and end up flying a Bird of Prey by the movies. So a lot of what's going to be in here is influenced by Klingons. Now, flipping inside, we see that it looks very similar. We've got the Starfleet branding here. Go inside, and it's an introduction, role of the Star Navy, scope of this manual. And then we're straight on to the different types of ships. But with only really one Romulan ship to go on, and lots of ideas to steal from the Klingons, I think they really are quite stretching with this book. We've got a troop transport here. Now it's got the swept forward nacelles and struts of the Bird of Prey. But apart from that, this could be anybody. This could be a Federation ship. It could be a Klingon ship. We've got the sort of feather arrangements on this assault ship. It looks a bit more Romulan, more like the Bird of Prey out of the movies. And I think that would have been an interesting way to take it. Would have been to take elements of the Klingon ships and bond them to more traditional Romulan designs from the series. We've got the Nova-class battleship. I really do quite like that. We've got the swept forward nacelles, solid body. Not sure about the front view of it, but it's a nice looking ship. Of course, we've got the stats for various versions of the ships here. For example, the Courier here, we've got the Type 2, the Type 6, and the Type 10. So when the ships are used in the original series, the movies, etc., taking it forward in time, so the factions ships aren't out of date. We've got a Courier ship, which looks kind of backwards to me. The warp nacelles at the front here, or if that's a warp nacelle, who knows. The Star Glider, I like what they've attempted with this by stretching out the wings of the bird of prey from the original episode. It looks a bit fragile, and they mention it doesn't handle well in atmosphere, whereas I thought massive wings would actually help it maneuver in atmospheres, but apparently not. Got a cruiser here. Again, looks like it could be any faction. In fact, the engines on this look very much like Federation ones. They look like the Enterprises ones out of the original series. And that's a lot of what this book is. We don't see anything which looks fantastically Romulan. They are really stretching. So it's probably a good thing they didn't go on to do a Gorn one, where we'd seen one Kitbash ship. I think it was like a Tholian vessel with warp nacelles strapped on it. The Tholians, of course, had their own design, so we could have maybe got a book out of that. We've got the Wing of Vengeance class cruiser here. I do quite like what they're doing with this. I think I'd have preferred it if the wings were swept forward instead of back, so the weapons were more prominent. But I like the idea of the warp nacelles being tucked under the body for protection, the wings surrounding it, so people can't shoot the engines, they're hidden away. Got a cruiser here, the Skyfire class. Carrying on through, Gallant Wing, again it's taking the bird of prey but bulking it out. We've got the central body here with more bulky wings and nacelles on it. White Wind, again looking more like the bird of prey design with feathers on it. A number of these vessels do look like birds, which I do kind of like. We'll come on to that more. Here we've got the classic bird of prey. Now that's the one out of Balance of Terror, the original series episode. I'm not sure about the diagram. It looks different to what I remember. When I was young, I used to have a set of models. I had a Klingon ship, I had the Enterprise, and I had Bird of Prey on a sort of three-pointed stand. And the Bird of Prey that I grew up in my room with me had slightly thicker struts, stretched out more. But that might have been the model and just not actually reality. Got Night Flyer class, which is updated version of the Bird of Prey. Stormbird, obviously the classic Klingon vessel, but updated. They've sort of added the feathered sections to make it more Romulan in design. They mention that the Klingons delivered a number of these hulls stripped of engines and weapons for the Romulans to fit out. Got the Starseeker class, which looks like the head of the bird of prey out of the movies attached to a different body. I kind of would have liked to have seen more of that, these elements added. As I said, we're starting to get to ones which really look like birds. The Wing Defender here especially. The Comet of Destruction looks quite cool. It's a cruiser, but the heavy body makes me think more of a freighter. But the Wing Defender class cruiser looks like a bird. It's got its wings raised high. It's got almost talons bared below it, a head. Very bird-like. I do like the design a lot. Carrying on through, we've got some cutters, which could be anybody's. They don't look particularly Romulan. They don't look anybody's. They're just generic spaceships. We're getting to another cutter here, and in the center we've got the recognition silhouettes, and then we've got a timeline of when each of these ships are introduced and when they are retired from service. The Death Talon, taking the classic bird of prey design and changing it around a bit. It's quite a nice attempt. Fireswarm class destroyer, a very Klingon-like design. A bright one, another one which is a bit like a bird. The Mular class escort, that looks like the Remora class off the Federation book. If I reach the Federation book, you can see the cover of it shows the Remora class, which has these wings thing, a circular hull, and a single nacelle. It looks very, very similar. I do think they were starting to run out of ideas. The Mandukam Gunboat, to me, looks very Romulan. But it turns out it's a Klingon vessel. So that seems back to front to me. The Great Defender class monitor, again, looks very generic. It looks almost Starfleet with the Reliant-like saucer and hull. But when you look at it, you can see that that's just the hull off the bird of prey. A Q4 Protector class monitor, could be anybody's. Free Flight class Scout, again looking like a slightly modified bird of prey. The Swiftwing class Scout, which looks very funky sci-fi and doesn't really look Star Trek at all. The Wind Carrier class Scout, again a bird of prey modified somewhat. To me it looks almost like it's going backwards. The wings should be reaching forwards, but apparently this is the front and this is the back. Then we've got the bird of prey out of the movies. A collaborative design between the Romulans and the Klingons. The Graffler class freighter. The Vesping class freighter, sort of taking it from the original series type designs into the movie era designs. More freighters. They do not look like anything in particular. They look very unbalanced. I'm guessing cargo pods go in here. It'd have been nice to have seen an image of that. The Murabin class transport, again, I'm guessing cargo pods go in beneath the nacelle. Praetor class warp shuttles, could be anybody's, as could the Razlova class warp shuttle. The repair tenders, again, don't look particularly Romulan. And the repair facilities and border defense outposts are very similar in design to the Klingon ones, the Federation ones. They had a look for space stations in the Star Trek role-playing game and just stuck with them across all three factions. And then we're reaching at the back and we've got tokens, and that is the book. It's some nice ideas in there. It's really leaning heavily on a design philosophy they'd come up with for the Star Trek role-playing game, which is very generic across all three species, and borrowing heavily from the Klingons, because we knew a bit more about them. But it's not a bad book. There's some interesting stats in there, and some of the designs you could see as a step towards the warbirds out of Next Generation. I could definitely see this battleship as a precursor to the Romulan warbird. So they did come up with some very good ideas, keeping in ethos with the Romulans from the series. So that was the Romulan Ship Recognition Manual, and that won the poll this week with the slightest of slight margins, as far as I can tell by a single vote, with 26% of the vote. Behind that came Fields of Fire on 24%. As I said, losing by, as far as I can tell, one single vote. I'd have loved to have covered Fields of Fire. It's an absolutely great book, but we'll put it back into a future poll and we'll get around to it in time. Behind that came Lichmaster for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay on 23%. On 16% came Caravans of Mars for Space 1889. And way back at the end came Vulture Warriors of Dimension X for Paranoia on only 11% of the vote. So, as usual now, we clear all those out and we put in a new range for the poll. And we put in Spycraft from Alderac Entertainment. It's a D20 based game, and the rule system which the Stargate RPG that we've covered before uses. I put in Capital, Pride and Profit for Mutant Chronicles, which I think is a fantastically interesting role-playing game. It's just not very popular in these polls, so we'll see if it turns out winning. I'm guessing it probably won't. I've put in the Player's Guide for the Street Fighter role-playing game. I've covered Street Fighter before, and I went through all the books in a single video, so none of the books got a really good look at them. And it's an interesting game. It very much surprised me that White Wolf, the people behind the World of Darkness, behind Vampire and Werewolf and all these moody RPGs, decided to do a RPG based on a beat-em-up arcade game. But they did, and it's really interesting. So it'd be kind of cool to go back through the Player's Guide and give it some time to itself instead of just cramming it in another video. In Rift Sourcebook 2, the Mechanoids, one of the signature monsters of the Rift setting. It'd be really interesting to have a look through that. And finally, I've gone back to Twilight 2000 with Bangkok, Cesspool of the Orient. Now, this has been in the poll a few times and it never wins, but it's one of the last source books for Twilight 2000 that I haven't covered, and I'd really like to have a look through it. But anyway, we shall see how the polls go. Another channel related stuff, well, I put all the polls on hold while I covered looking after my elderly mother, and I thought that was past. I thought I'd done my month over the summer. But it turns out I'm going to have to cover again in a few weeks' time, so there might be a little upset to the channel, but we'll deal that when we get to it. It's about 2-3 weeks away. Other channel related stuff, I'm still trying to get back into the swing of things. I've still got a bunch of ideas. I'm trying to link a Discord to the channel, but every time I put the link in, it just doesn't work. So if anybody has any advice on that, please get in touch, it'd be appreciated. But other than that, there's nothing much going on. I'm just really trying to get back into the swing of things. So I think I've whittled on for quite long enough as usual. So thank you very, very much for watching. But most of all, as always, you look after yourselves. And I'll catch you later. Bye now.